Hi, my name is Stuart Weems and welcome to the Investopoly podcast. My goal is to give you simple, easy to understand insights, strategies and tips to help you master the game of building wealth. And in last week's podcast episode, I talked about what opportunities and risks the market might bring us during or throughout 2022 this year. And I use those expectations to help me set some realistic goals. And I discussed why that was the case last week. So if you missed that episode, please check it out. Now, I guess it's stating the obvious that goal setting is important. As the saying goes, if you aim at nothing, it's probably exactly what you'll achieve. That is nothing. But setting goals allows you to take control of the things that you can control. There's lots of things in life that occur or happen around us. And of course, we can't control those things, so we shouldn't worry about them. But there are a number of things that we can control, how and where we invest, how we spend our cash flow, these sorts of things. And if we don't set goals, essentially what you'll end up being is just a passenger on the bus rather than driving the bus. And I'd much rather be the driver rather than the passenger. Now, I should say, in regards to goal setting, there's really no right or wrong way. So my hope with doing this podcast or this podcast episode is that I share what we do and it gives you some ideas. So it won't necessarily be true that following my approach or my wife and I's approach verbatim will be the correct approach for you. What you need to do is find what works for you. And it's really just about refining it over a period of time and making sure it works. So there's 5 steps to this approach or what we use. Mostly, it's mostly relevant, I think, to setting financial goals, although it still impacts, other types of goals. But before I get there, let me share a couple of tips, goal setting tips that I've learned over the last 20 years of probably over the last 20 years, almost always setting goals. I'm sure there might have been a couple of years that I missed doing that, but I'm typically set goals each year. So the first one is make sure you're as specific as you possibly can, and make it realistic and make it measurable. So let me give you an example. An example of get fit or lose weight is pretty useless because it's too vague. And it's useless because it doesn't really inform your subconscious about what your focus is or where your focus should be. It's just too wide. Whereas you need to try and be specific, measurable, and be careful about the words or how you frame what your goal looks like. Because we do. I don't want to get too sort of deep, but there is a subconscious element to achieving goals. And so we want to be careful about how we train our brain to focus on things that we want to focus on. So really, when you write down your goals, it's okay to just write them out and draft, but then go and have a look at how you've framed your goals in terms of words and make sure it's specific, realistic and measurable. The second one is, and this is probably my biggest lesson with goal setting, is don't be afraid to set a low bar. Which is kind of counterintuitive because we think goal setting is all about achieving more. And so we think we should be stretching ourselves, and we should if it's appropriate, of course, but it's not absolutely necessary. And in fact, if this is the first time this goal has appeared on your list, the first time that this topic has appeared on your list, or you've failed to achieve this goal in the past, then it's even more important to set a lower bar. Remember, some progress at the end of the year is going to be better than nothing at all. And the problem with setting unrealistic goals is they can be incredibly demotivating. If you sit down and go, you might be super motivated at the start of the year, because health goals are a really good example to use, so I'll use them probably throughout the podcast a couple of times. But if you're super motivated at the beginning of the year, you might sit down and go, all right, I'm going to exercise 6 days a week. Just have one rest day per week. But the problem is it's probably unrealistic for most people, particularly if you haven't been exercising 4 or 5 days religiously the year before. Maybe then 6 days is a realistic goal, but if you're going from nothing or very little to 6 days a week, you forget about it. You're never going to do it. And the goal is going to seem so far away and so hard and so unachievable. that as soon as you miss a few weeks, you're completely demotivated, and you forget about the goal. So in reality, the reality is that if you exercise, say, 3 days a week for maybe 42 out of 52 weeks a year, so most of the time, it probably goes a very long way to achieving your health goal anyway. You don't need to exercise 6 days a week, perhaps. So, as I said, unrealistic goals are really demotivating. You can always extend the goal during the year if you feel like you've set a too low a bar. But really, when you're goal setting, set a goal that you look at and you think, oh, that's quite easy to achieve, because that's actually quite specific and set a low bar. My health goals for this year read like there's 3 things I need to do. There's firstly exercise 40 minutes 3 times a week. Like that's not a big deal. And I track this on an app called Easy Habits, but just to track my compliance. Although the Apple Watch picks up the training as well. I've got a general rule: don't eat after 8:30 p.m. Sometimes sitting in front of the TV, you start to snack, and I've eliminated that. And one day a week I can eat whatever I want. The other days a week I'm mindful about what I eat. So sort of one cheat day, if you like. Those got 3 goals there. I think are really realistic. They're measurable. They're specific. And when I look at them, I think, I can do that. 90% of the weeks throughout 2022, I can achieve that. Remember, when it comes to goals or achieving goals, consistency is way more important than effort. So I'll say that again. Consistency is way more important than effort. Just a 1% improvement or effort every day for the year will result in a 37 times improvement. That incremental improvement each day, that's all it requires, but it's the consistency, not the effort, that is the most important thing. Okay, so with that preamble, let me jump into the 5-step process that my wife and I go through every year. Particularly, I'm sharing this particularly in relation to financial goals, because this is a financial podcast, of course, but it includes other goals as well. So the first thing I like to do is review last year's goals. Obviously, it's good to reflect on achievement and sort of pat yourself on the back. If you've achieved 90% of your goals that you set last year, I think that's a really good outcome. There's probably, I can't remember a year that I've achieved 100%, so that's an unrealistic expectation. But if you can achieve most of them, you're doing pretty well, I reckon. And then also to focus on or have a look at which goals didn't you achieve. And you need to understand why. So firstly, it could be just circumstantial, that circumstances didn't allow you, maybe because of COVID lockdowns or whatever. If one of your goals was to travel overseas last year, for example, well, of course you didn't achieve it. In which case then, that's fine. Maybe roll the goal over or keep the goal on this year's list. If it's another reason, maybe like accountability, you just didn't follow through on the actions required, then think about including the goal again, but then creating some sort of accountability mechanism, particularly having a third party holding you accountable for undertaking the actions to achieve the goal. Or finally, maybe the goal's just not that important to you. You thought it was important, you included it on the list, but really when you reflect on it, it's not that big a deal. And so we should let ourselves off the hook if that's the case and just forget about the goal and don't worry about it. It will happen from time to time when you'll set goals and then you work out, actually, this goal's not that important to me. So that's the first thing, is to work out which of those goals that you didn't achieve last year should come onto this year's list. Step 2 is to forecast your surplus cash flow. Now, I find many goals are dependent on surplus cash flow, whether you want to go on holidays and the extent of what that holiday looks like, home improvements, and virtually, of course, all financial goals dependent on surplus cash flow. So I find it logical to start with that, to sort of forecast what will my cash flow look like, or what do I expect it to look like over 2022. And it allows me then to prioritise my investment goals, so allocate surplus cash towards achieving them first. And then it informs me about how ambitious my lifestyle goals can be. So if I've got substantial monies left over, for example, well, maybe that holiday can be a little bit longer or a little bit better, and so forth. So in order to do that, the first thing you need to do is obviously forecast what your income will look like. And if you're a PAYG employee, that's relatively easy. If you're self-employed, you're obviously going to need to do a business cash flow forecast. The second step then is to add up all your outflows. Now, some are going to be relatively easy to ascertain, like tax, loan repayments, any investment plans that you've got, like making additional super contributions, and non-discretionary expenses like school fees or utility bills and so forth. The one item that a lot of people struggle with is the discretionary expenditure, discretionary living expenses. So groceries, going out, entertainment, those sorts of things. And if you struggle with it, well, maybe this could be your first financial goal for 2022, which is to get on top of cash flow management, because expense tracking, even just at a high level, not at a granular level necessarily, is incredibly important. You need to know where your money is going and how much money you're spending and how much money you have left over. And if you don't know that, then that's got to be the number one thing. To my mind, basic cash flow or expenditure tracking is the cornerstone of good money management. And it's imperative no matter what your income is. So don't think that, I'm going to earn $1 million next year, I don't need to track expenses. No, incorrect. Everyone needs to track expenses. I'm sure maybe if you're a billionaire, you probably don't. But every single client of mine that some earn very substantial seven-figure incomes still need to have good cash flow management. So expenditure tracking is really important. It's easy for my wife and I. We track our expenses each month between discretionary and non-discretionary and a couple of other different categories. So it's easy to pick that figure up and know what we will spend this year to calculate our surplus cash flow. Okay, so once you've done that, once you've got an idea of what your surplus cash flow looks like this year, then step 3 is to sit down and actually draft your goals. And we draft goals in 4 different categories. The first one is financial, which is obviously self-explanatory. And these goals are really guided by our long-term financial plan, because the long-term plan determines what steps we need to take this year so that we're able to achieve our longer-term financial goals, say, in 10 years' time. So it's very long-term focused, but it informs us what we need to do over the next 12 months. The second category is relationship goals. We believe a wonderful marriage takes deliberate effort. So we always sit back and think about how can we improve our relationship. Third is personal goals. Important to do something for yourself. Health goals tend to dominate this category for me, or in fact, almost entirely this category for me. And then fourth, business/career goals. And this category isn't always, or doesn't always have to be financial, by the way. It can include, things like working fewer hours or doing work that you've got a greater connection with, the type of work and so forth. Doesn't have to be financial. So financial, relationship, personal and business/career goals are the 4 categories we like to set goals in. Typically, I'll probably set 2 or 3 goals in each of those categories. Some categories might have less. Just be careful about overcommitting. Like I said, set a low bar. But as long as you're taking measurable and meaningful in making improvements each year, you'll find the compounding impact year on year is pretty substantial. So once I've set the goals and listed them, I use Evernote to keep all my notes, which is another app, and I'll list my goals in there. But once we've drafted the goals, the 4th step is what I do is project what our net worth will look like at the end of 2022. And so what I'm not trying to do, or I'm not that interested in, is market movements. So I'm not trying to think, what will my super return, or what will the share market return, or what will property do. Not really that interested in that. I'll put in some conservative assumptions, but that's not the reason to do it. What I'm trying to do is reflect the impact of my goals on my net worth. And particularly, obviously, this is related to financial goals. So more specifically, it's, what new investments am I making, contributions into super, investing in the share market, those sorts of things. And then also things like debt reduction, whether it's putting money in offset or actually reducing the loan amount. I want to reflect that. So that allows me then to measure the impact of my goals. Are they aggressive enough? Am I happy with the change in net worth over the projected change in net worth over the year? And then secondly, it gives me something for next year to look back on and say, well, how are we going? Are we tracking where we thought we might be? Now, of course, market movements can change, right? If the share market drops 30% in December 2022, then, that's going to affect my net worth. But I'm not, but I can adjust for that, if you like. I can work that out. Okay, and then the fifth step is to put the goals away and then come back to them one or two more times just to review them and talk about them. I find that optimizing and revising goals over a couple of weeks' time is kind of good. You tend to tighten up the wording, make them a little bit more specific. You might add or delete some. You find, actually that's not that important to me anymore. So throughout the course of January, we do that. And we aim by the end of January to sort of finalise the goals, if you like. And that's really the last step to the goal setting exercise, except for then sticking them up. So we stick the goals, that we print them out, and we stick them up somewhere that we'll see them every day. Just subconsciously, it's good to read your goals regularly, because subconsciously you'll start thinking, have I done anything this week to hit on that goal or to get closer to that goal? Because it's really all about actions, and hopefully it's all about weekly actions, because it's that 1% improvement each week that will have a dramatic impact to your life over the course of a year. And we find sticking them up somewhere in the bedroom or bathroom is a good place, because first thing in the morning at the start of each day, you're almost forced to look at it and you'll see it. Now, you might not sit there and read it verbatim each day, but you'll see that, and it'll be a really good sort of daily reminder, if you like. Now, as the Chinese proverb says, a journey of 1,000 miles begins with a single step. So seeing your goals each day and taking that one step each day towards achieving your goals is really the right approach. Otherwise, the goals seem almost overwhelming and not achievable. Setting some goals and achieving some is much better than setting none at all and achieving nothing at all. Anyway, I hope that's been useful. Best of luck with your goal setting throughout January. I think it's a really exciting and motivating process to go through, and I hope this podcast has been some help. Of course, like always, any links and so forth, check out the blog on the website and show notes. Cheers.